Where do Python objects store their attributes? We have a class here called product, and we have two instances of this class. Each of these class instances has their own separate data, a name attribute and a price attribute. Where are these attributes actually stored? Where does their data live? Each of these class instances has a dunderdict attribute, which is a dictionary that actually stores the data that we normally look up on these objects. We can actually modify this dictionary in order to change the attributes on one of these objects. Note that you shouldn't do this. This is not something that you're supposed to do in Python, but you can do it. And in fact, this is what Python does under the hood whenever you assign to an attribute on a class instance. So if we assign to an attribute on our duck object, the dunderdict dictionary for that object will change. Python's modules also use a dunderdict attribute to store their data. If we look at the dunderdict attribute of the math module, we'll see a whole bunch of stuff in this dictionary. Most of these things are functions that exist in the math module, but some of these are constants, like pi, e, and tau. Just like modules and class instances, classes also use a dunderdict attribute to store their class attributes. Note that we're not looking at the dunderdict dictionary on an instance of the product class. We're looking at dunderdict on the class itself. You can see that our dunder_init method and the displayPrice method are in this dunderdict dictionary. We often think of attributes and methods as distinct groups, but methods are also attributes. A method is a function that lives on a class, which means it's also a class-level attribute. If you pass an object to the built-in vars function, it will return the dunderdict dictionary for that object. You might wonder, what's the point of that? Why not just access the dunderdict attribute directly? I usually try to avoid accessing dunder attributes if there's a higher level way to get the same information. For example, I prefer to use the built-in type function to get the type of an object, instead of accessing that object's dunder class attribute. They do the same thing, but the type function is higher level. Similarly, I often consider using the built-in vars function instead of directly accessing the dunderdict attribute of an object. But they do the same thing, meaning the vars function only works on objects that have a dunderdict attribute, and not every object does. Up to this point, you may have assumed that every object in Python is powered by a dictionary that stores its attributes. But that's not quite true. Not every object in Python uses a dictionary to store its attributes. For example, all integers have a real attribute, but they don't store their data in a dictionary. They don't have a dunderdict attribute. Most of Python's built-in classes don't use a dunderdict dictionary to store the data for their class instances. They store that data somewhere else that we can't easily access. This is a memory optimization. It's actually possible to optimize the memory of our own classes using a dunderslots attribute, but that's a discussion for another time. If we want to see all the attributes that live on an arbitrary Python object, we can use the built-in dir function, which I often pronounce dir. Every object in Python can be passed to the built-in dir function to see the attributes that object has. But note that this is a bit different from accessing the dunderdict attribute on a class instance. The dir function shows us both attributes that live on the object and attributes that live on that object's class, like these dunder methods. So when you pass an object to dir, you'll see instance attributes and class attributes, including methods. The dir function works on any object. So for example, if we pass a module to the dir function, we'll see all the attributes that live in that module. It's actually a pretty handy way to see what a module contains. Most objects in Python store their attributes in a dunderdict dictionary. The built-in vars function can be used to access this dictionary, returning all the instance attributes of an object. But not all objects have a dunderdict dictionary, so not all objects work with the built-in vars function. All objects do work with the built-in dir function, which will give you not just the attributes, but also the methods and class attributes of an object. And if you're curious where your object's attributes are stored, it's probably in a dunderdict dictionary.